Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates. With your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everybody. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. And today we're going to be talking to Heidi Rome, and she's going to be talking about her son. She's also an author of a book. She has a business where she helps other mothers that have autistic kids, and she's an author. And she is going to talk to us today about her son, Ethan, and some of the conversations that she's had with him as he learned how to do facilitated communication. And we're going to get into some spiritual things, emotional things, and it's a pretty interesting conversation. I can't wait to share it with you. Today I'm here with Heidi. Hi, Heidi. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Cindy.
And we're going to talk just like I talk to every other mom. I ask everybody kind of the same series of questions, and everybody's story is completely different. Everybody has a different perspective. And yours, I think, is very interesting. And that's why I have you on, so that we can talk about your son's story and your book. And we'll get to all of that later. So let's start at the very beginning. First of all, what's your son's name?
Ethan.
Ethan. So when you were pregnant with Ethan, did you have a healthy pregnancy? Were there any red flags, any warnings that something might be wrong, or no?
Not at all. It was a perfectly normal pregnancy. We had used assisted reproduction, so there was that element to it, at least in the beginning. But certainly during the pregnancy, it was a normal full-term pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. And then how about the labor and delivery?
It was a planned C-section. My first son was an emergency C-section, so this one was planned, but again, nothing unexpected.
Okay. All right. So you had another son before. So Ethan is your second child, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What's the age difference?
2.5 years.
Okay. So it wasn't too long ago that you had just had a baby, right? So yeah, there's a difference between that and being a first-time mom, right? So
True.
Yeah.
Yes, because you can compare to the first time. So.
Yeah, and it was another boy too. So for me, I had girls first, and then when I had Robbie, I thought, wow, boys are really different. They're really stubborn. They don't listen to you at all. Never occurred to me, that something was going on. So then, how about his development? Was that on target? Was he delayed?
He was not regressive. He did not have regressive autism where he had been developing normally and then lost ability. Ethan, from the beginning, there were signs that he was different than other kids. He was very silent. That was one thing. He rarely cried. And then eventually, even through early babyhood, he would not babble. So there was no practice of language, baba, mama, none of that normal stuff. Any sound he would make was more of a tone of a single note. That would be at different times. And when we would listen through the baby monitor, like at night, he might laugh sometimes. Mm-hmm. And we would laugh to ourselves. What's so funny in there, And at that point, both grandmas were gone, and we said, oh, maybe there's a grandma visiting right now. We were joking about that because it was so unusual. It was not the regular baby stuff.
Yeah, it's so funny that you brought that up, because the interview that I'm going to have right after yours, which I've already pre-recorded, that was a subject that came up. I was saying how moms on these autism pages are talking about their kids waking up around 4 o'clock in the morning and laughing. And they're like, what are they laughing at? And I said, oh, they're playing with their angels. And I wasn't the only person that said something like that. So, and that's a segue into what we're going to talk about later. So you did notice that. How about eye contact?
Also not the same. Eric, my first guy, very engaging, almost out of the womb. He was looking what's going on around here. And Ethan really was not interested in people or anything really going on around him.
Mm-hmm. What did he like to do when he was a baby? Like, did he like playing with toys or anything? Or no, did he show any interest in anything? TV, anything like?
Well, what he was very absorbed in, yes, TV, certain cartoons. And then it was right before the iPad everywhere. We had a DVD player, and he would get very absorbed with that. The precursor to the iPad, where that is a fixation, wanting to replay cartoon theme songs over and over again, certain ones.
Yeah, but music, the songs.
Music,
right? Yeah.
music. Yeah.
Yeah, because my son Robbie too, he loved Disney, and especially all the songs, right? Yeah. How old is he now?
He's now 15.
He's 15. Okay. Oh, he's only half of Robbie's age. Okay. Yeah, because we were doing VHS tapes in the
Feels like
VCR,
yesterday, but yeah.
and we wore a lot of them out.
Yep.
And the problem is that Disney would put the movies in the vault and you couldn't get them. So if he broke the Peter Pan tape and they put that one in the vault, we'd go scrambling, trying to find a garage sale or somebody that was getting rid of them. So, all right. So let's lead up to the autism diagnosis. How old was he? Who diagnosed him? How'd you find out?
He was diagnosed by a neurodevelopmental pediatrician.
Right.
And at the local hospital here. And we had started off, he was physically delayed, and we thought that was what was happening. He wasn't sitting up unsupported at 9 months, and that the pediatrician said is a signal that there's a delay. And so
because that was my other question, is what was the pediatrician saying at the time?
Yeah, that was the alert to her that there wasn't normal development, but it seemed to be focused on the physical. The original term they'll use is PDD-NOS.
Yep.
Because
pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. We always throw out the moms, we throw out all these terms, and I always try to explain to the audience what we're talking about.
Thank you. Yes, I know it's like, you don't realize the alphabet soup until
yes, which basically was just another explanation for autism, just not as many symptoms, right?
Right. And what they said to me at that point, because I did ask about autism, I actually used the word asking, and they said, oh, he's too young and don't worry yet. And, and I was a late bloomer, so maybe he's a late bloom, so they don't want to actually use the word, at least back then. Until they feel they must. And so what was happening though is, he was getting the PT, and then we're saying, well, but he's not talking well, but, and we were seeing these other things going on, and the stereotypy behaviors, the stimming and the flapping and that sort of thing. So we were doing all kinds of therapies for him. And eventually we brought him to, this developmental pediatrician to evaluate him. And then at one point, she said autism. She herself used the word. And
And how old was he at this time?
He was about 20 months.
Oh, okay. He wasn't even 2 yet.
Wasn't even 2.
Okay.
And I remember getting into the car with my husband, just sitting there silently. And it was like hitting us. And we had heard this word from her. And, we said, this is a really hard day. Like this, I can get choked up now thinking about that. And then we went on, with more evaluation. Ultimately, when he was 5 years old, we brought him into New York for an evaluation at this world-renowned autism center at the time, and had them do more evaluation, I think thinking, well, maybe they'll come up with something different. And after several days of testing and a report like this, he was 5 years old when we brought him. And what they told me at that time was that he had the mental capacity of a 5-month-old baby, which was horribly devastating. I mean, I cried at least for a week, if not more, after hearing that. And they're telling me that ultimately had tremendous impact in my relationship and how I viewed Ethan, what I thought he understood, what I thought he could receive from me, as a mom, and in every way, my feeling that he doesn't really get it. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't care what's going on. And I lived under that until later, where all of a sudden I realized, don't believe everything you hear, no matter who the authority is.
Right.
There's often another layer that only the mom would pick up on.
Okay, so that was 5 years old. So did he go to a regular preschool or?
Oh, no. He early on, I mean, it was clear he was a very high need kid. A lot of also head banging, so a lot of self-injurious things, even as a very little guy. So it was clear at that point that the local public school could not handle Ethan's high level of need. And so he went out of district to a school that specialized in kids with autism. And their approach was ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. And I was told at that point, it's the only way, it's the key, basically they educate him out of having autism. And I was all in for that, because at that point in my life, in my journey on the autism journey with Ethan, it was, I'm going to fix this kid. And this sounds like the way to do it. Get him in a school, make him look normal and be like every other kid. And that was fine until it wasn't.
Now, and I read your book and I resonated with all that too, because now Robbie would be 30. Okay, so I'm way ahead of you. So his school also used ABA, but back then, yeah, autism was this horrible diagnosis, and everybody did what they could to get them to snap out of it. And everyone was looking for every kind of miracle cure. I remember a story of a family taking their kid to Philadelphia and he got a shot or medication for something else, and all of a sudden his autism went away. So then everybody was running to go get whatever this was. And they said, listen, this is not a miracle cure, but any kind of miracle cure that was out there, people were going after. And you kept hearing these stories in Hollywood too, with this Hollywood star that took their kid off of dairy and gluten and put them on and now their son is cured. And it made me feel like I'm a lousy parent, because I wasn't curing my son. I wasn't finding the right magical thing.
That's exactly. Well, and I write about that in my book, about this societal tragedy narrative of autism, that, if you're going to be a good mother, and the myth of a good mother, if you're a good mother, you're going to find the cure. And if you have to go to Romania or go to Ukraine and swim with dolphins because magical, that's a real thing.
I know.
Right? That, okay, go and hey, and if I don't find the money and a Russian interpreter to go with me, I'm not a good mother. I don't care enough. And it's a horrible treadmill to be on. And having tried the diets and the medical interventions and the, you name it, we did it.
Sure, and the vitamin therapies and yeah.
Oh, exactly. And that's not to say it doesn't work for some kids, but it becomes this torturous, gotta fix it mission. And you're always racing the window of neuroplasticity, that the window is going to close. And if I don't find the cure in time, I've blown it. I've ruined his life because I didn't find the cure in time before.
And they tell you it's very important to do everything before the age of 5, because if they're ever going to speak, it's going to happen before they turn 5. And once they hit 5, it's, right? Didn't you talk about that in the book too?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And so instead of celebrating a kid's birthday, you're like, you have these fingers around your throat because a birthday, time is running out. It's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah. And I'm going to share this too. I haven't talked about this with anybody else, but at the time, I think Robbie was, 3, 4, something like that. I was going to a church that they taught word of faith, which means basically you memorize Bible scriptures, and whatever you need, you pray those scriptures. And so if you need healing in an area, you would pray scriptures about healing. And a dear friend who I went to church with came to me and she said to me, you should be speaking the word over Robbie. You should be praying for him to be healed every day. But I felt that I had heard from God, and I don't normally talk like this. Oh, God spoke to me, because people think that you're kooky, but I definitely felt like when I was praying for him, I felt that God said to me, just love him the way he is. And I know you get that. He said, just love him the way he is. So when this person came to me and said, you should be praying, it was like she was basically saying, you should be trying to get him to snap out of this. Right. You're right. The same thing as everybody else is telling me. Right. And I was like, no, I know God told me love him the way he is. Now I could turn around in a year from now and God says to me, okay, now's the time to pray for him to be healed because I'm going to heal him, but for now, what he said to me was, love him the way he is. So I want to make sure that I segue everything that you're going to say by telling everybody this. Okay. So let's move on. So he's 5. So he's going to a school for autistic kids. They're teaching him ABA. And then let's go on with the story from there.
Well, he learned a lot there for sure. I'll be ever grateful for, at age 6, toilet training, which was a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hallelujah.
Yes.
Finally
Yes.
at 6. And so it was okay. And it was a small place. He got a lot of attention, all that. And then gradually though, it was an extreme. It was a place where they would only do ABA. They felt that any need could be met only through ABA. So there was no OT or PT or speech there. Right. They felt that all those, and including speech, and their feeling was, well, if he wants to speak enough, he will. And I actually asked the director there, I said, you mean like if someone's in a wheelchair, if they want to walk enough, they will? Like what kind of, and it was absolutely shut down. Their feeling was, if he wants to enough, if it was the right reinforcer,
right,
all that stuff, you remember,
mm-hmm.
Then it's about figuring out the right reinforcer and withholding the reinforcement to have him behave the way you want him to behave, or not behave the way you don't want him to behave. And eventually, as he got bigger and bigger and stronger and was growing, and those disruptive behaviors I mentioned before, when he's 2 years old, you can manage. When he's 8 and 9 and a big guy, mm-hmm. and strong, and beginning, when he would bang his head, he was like up to here on me at that point. And I said, oh my God, another inch, he's going to hit my teeth.
Right.
And what ended up happening is that the only thing they had to offer at that point was how to restrain him.
Yeah.
We couldn't come up with the right balance of, reinforcer or all that. And then they kind of turn the tables, and this is what happens with ABA, that it's the parents' fault. That we were not consistent, or we were not using the reinforcement. We
weren't following through at home.
Right. We weren't carrying through sufficiently at home, and they wrote us up.
Oh boy.
So it was like,
well, I wonder if behaviors are caused because they can't communicate, right? So, but they're not giving them really a way to communicate. They're just dealing with the negative behaviors.
Right.
They also, in Robbie's school, they also use the PEX system, which is a picture exchange. So it was a way to communicate. So they would sit down and they would put food in front of him, and then a picture of a cookie, cracker, whatever. And they wanted him to pick the right picture to hand it to them. And then he'd hand him a picture of a goldfish. They'd give him the goldfish to eat, just so people understand what picture exchange is. So they're hoping that eventually when he wants to eat, he'll hand you the picture. And that's his way of communicating and saying, I want this. Were they using anything like that?
No, they didn't even offer that.
Really?
It was all about speak.
Well, what kind of activities were they trying to get him to do?
Well, they would academia and and teaching him different life skills. I mean, the different toileting or hand washing, all the different things of brushing his teeth, all that stuff.
Right.
The alphabet, copying, the things you learn in school. But when it came to therapeutic things, mm-hmm. it would be more of reward him, breaking up the word. And if he repeated the sound, mm-hmm. rewarded, and then putting those sounds together. And that was and these were people who were not trained.
Oh, okay. All right. So at least they were trying to get him to make sounds though.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
But there was no cohesive system like PEX or anything else that would have been instead of spoken language.
Right.
It was speak or nothing.
Right. Okay. So what did you do?
Well, in the beginning, I'll admit now, we were secretly taking him for therapy, keeping it absolute, like you would have thought we were, like the black market of whatever. I mean, we were secretly taking him to OT, PT, and speech.
Right.
And they didn't want that because that would mess up their data. They consider those science-based, and they'll take data on anything.
Right. And
so
they keep track of every single breath they take, everything they do.
Oh, right. So they don't want you doing therapies because that upsets, it's another variable that they're not keeping track of. So eventually what was happening is as he was hurting himself. We couldn't keep him safe. We weren't getting help from them. We said, this is nuts. This is not working. And even though we thought we were at the, the Olympic gold of schools, we said, it's not working for him. It's not a fit. And we made the very difficult decision to give up that school, that placement, and transfer him to a school with a completely different approach called DIR Floor Time, which is Developmental Individual Relationship Model. So it's based on play, the way all babies learn. Play is based on relationship and experimentation and turn taking and trying new things in the context of a safe relationship. And that was the approach of the school. And their motto was presume competence, that you're going to help someone to the level that they need, no more, no less. You don't do it for them, but you support them so that they can do it to the degree that they can. And you assume everyone can. So he was 9 at that point. So we made that move. I won't get into the lawyering and what's involved in making these changes happen. It's complicated.
Yeah, but that's okay. But that's important to know. So it wasn't that easy to just pull him out and bring him to a new school. You had to go fight your school system then, I guess, if you brought in lawyers.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because they usually don't want to pay to go somewhere else, right?
It's not allowed to say that because it is under the federal law IDEA. Every child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. So they can't say we don't want to spend the money on this free and appropriate public education. So they'll find a million reasons. So ultimately, though, we had to bring a lawyer in. Fortunately, because it was the school district actually was cooperative. They were already paying for him to go to the first one. So it wasn't a terrible switch for the second.
So for anyone that's going through that, you can go back to a previous episode that I did where I interviewed Gail Libertucci. She has a business called the Child Advocacy Place in New Jersey, and she gives her phone number and her contact information. And this is what she specializes in. She helps people if they feel that your child needs a different placement in another school. She will go to court. She will do what she needs to do. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to move on. But if anybody needs that, go back and watch or listen to that episode. Okay, so let's talk about the new school a little bit. So
completely different environment. And one of the things that they offered, and this was a game changer for us, was facilitated communication. They offered the gamut of assisted communication techniques, whether it was PECs or Proloquo to go, because at this point now,
what is that exactly? Just explain to people.
That's a program to help.
It's on a computer, laptop?
Yep, it's on an iPad. You could put it on an iPad, download it as an app, and it's a system to help people who need help speaking say what they want to say. So, and it's pretty intuitive. It does pretty logical groupings of things so that you can begin to choose what you want to say, and you can also program it with variable things that you want to add in. And it has a keyboard for people who have, this is the key, that they have the motor control to do independent typing. Not all of our kids do.
Right.
Our kids are wired differently. So they're not always able to, oh, I want to type, have a good day. And they can't, it's not like someone with laryngitis, I just, can't really physically speak, but I'll type out what I want to say. Our kids are wired differently. Speech is a very complicated process in the brain and the mouth and the coordination of all that.
Right.
Or even typing. So it's complicated. So these apps help people who have speech issues communicate.
So when Robbie first started school, so this was 1992, I went to a parent group and a mom was talking about her son was using a facilitated communication, and he was typing out to her because he was having a meltdown, he was having a fit, and she said, what is the problem? So he typed it out and he says, I'm saying I want a cracker, but I really want a cookie. So what was coming out of his mouth was not what his brain wanted to say, but he was able to type it out and facilitate it. So anyway, that's my experience with it.
The teacher there actually had told me a situation. She typed with all the kids who wanted to do it, or that the parents wanted to try it. That was a very common story, that they want to say one thing, but they're not communicating what they want to say. And one girl was typing, about Barney, and the teacher was thinking, this is unusual. I know there's more, she cares more about things than Barney. Why? I wonder why. And she had this brainstorm. She said, I'm just going to try typing with her other hand. And she did. And the girl typed, thank you so much for doing that. With my other hand, I could only type about Barney. Now I can tell you what I want to say. It was unbelievable. I mean, she had so many stories like this of people who just, for whatever reason are held up in what they want to say or communicate. And so to be in a place where you have people who are figuring out, what do you need, kid? What is it that you and your brain and your body, what in your situation, what do you need? And then match up the technique. Okay, in your case, let's try this, let's try that, or a version of this. And that was what they did there. And in our case with Ethan, the facilitated communication was a game changer, where all of a sudden this child, who I was told when he was 5 that he had the mental capacity of a 5-month-old baby, all of a sudden was typing things that were blowing us away.
So like what?
Well, I'll give you, an example from the very beginning, where we knew he knew the keyboard. So that was not a shock. He had learned the keyboard. So we knew he could copy, which is a different part of the brain than expression, but at least we knew he knew that. And when we did the intake to the school, we were testing out the facilitated communication because we had no idea what it was. We had never heard of it. What is this thing? And it's very simple in the beginning. It's offering pairs of things, and then the kid responds and picks one. So she said to him at this intake, Ethan, what's your favorite flavor? Ice cream. And there were the 2 choices. And I knew what the answer was, strawberry or chocolate. And he said the first thing he heard, which was strawberry. And I'm thinking I'm just watching, but I'm thinking to myself, that's not true. But he typed chocolate, which was true, and he spelled it correctly. And I'm like, that's correct, and he spelled it right. How does he do that? What?
Yeah, how did he know how to spell that?
How did he know how to spell that? And why did what he said was different from what he typed?
Yeah, because he was echoing what she just said, rather than,
But through the typing, it was the intention, because there's a slight resistance. So he had to almost not fight, but push against her hand, which slowed down the impulsivity.
Oh.
And so it's like, oh, okay, wait, what do I want to say? And this is what was happening.
Interesting. So for those that are only listening to audio, they can't see what you're
I'm showing
demonstrating.
my hand. My hand is in a natural pointing position. When you press against near the wrist, the inside of the wrist, and I'm pressing against it, I have to push. If I'm pushing against it even slightly, it's slowing me down, which is important for our kids, that it's not just, whatever impulse hits them. So it was in that way that he was able to go back and forth and point to letters on a letterboard or a keyboard.
Got it.
So that was what we were using to communicate. But okay, that was the intake. His first week at school, I get a phone call after that first week from the teacher. And Cindy, when you have an autistic kid, you don't want
that. You don't want a phone call. No. Your mind immediately goes to the worst. What just happened?
Did he bite someone? You're thinking the worst.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hello. And she's, I wanted to tell you about an exchange I had with Ethan. I said, exchange? Okay, what? And she said, well, I said to him, Ethan, you're at the new school now for a week. Can you give me 3 words? How do you feel here in the new school? And she told me afterwards she only asked for 3 words because she didn't want to overwhelm him with too many things. So she said, okay. And there was a big difference between the 2 schools. The old school was tiny and silent, and the new school was huge and loud and bustling. And so she thought he's going to say loud, colorful, whatever he might say. The 3 words that Ethan typed were basking in joy. And that's what she
Asking?
told me.
How did that? I mean, that's a whole like poetic phrase.
Seriously.
That's not just 3 words.
No, well, that's it. That's why she was like, I didn't want to email you that. I wanted to tell you that. I'm like, okay, like, I'm like, what planet are we on? Like, this
Right.
is crazy. This was the kid with the 5-month-old.
Right.
And I'm like, wow. And then, Cindy, there were a series of things that I write about in the book, but, you know, one example to just share with you the depth going on here was I'd gone into practice with him, the typing again with simple directions I should let you know that Ethan will not, to this day, he will not type with me. And we actually have this on video, this exchange. I said, Ethan, you know, why won't you type with me? And the stinker verbally says, no, no, mommy, no. I'm like, oh, come on.
But why?
I said, I'll give you the iPad, you know, the big guys. I'll give you Oreo cookies. No. Right at me. No. It's like, why not?
Yeah.
Why won't you type with me? And he types with the teacher, you're too tense.
Oh, see, he's picking up on your energy there.
Hugely. Absolutely. He's very sensitive. And I laughed. I said, you're right, bud. You're right. You know, because there I am, you know, you can tell me anything. You know, like, he's probably like, Mom, back off.
Back off. Yeah.
Back off. So he, you know, so I go into work with him, with the teacher, and she says, okay, we're going to practice everyday things. What does he like to do? And this was a long time ago. He was about 9 or 10, 9 years old. So this was about 6 years ago. And she says, Ethan, you know, just to me, what does Ethan like to do in the evening? And he liked to watch the news. Now we don't want to watch the news, but then we were watching the news. And she said, you know, she says, oh, Ethan, Mom says you like to watch the news. That's very cool. Why do you like to watch the news? And he types, I like global things. Okay. That's great. She says, why do you like global things? I'm interested in conflict. So Miss Neurotic gets nervous, like, why is he interested in conflict? Is he a criminal?
Yes, he violent.
You're beginning to know why he doesn't want to type with me, right? Like, you know, and I'm more, but the teacher, cool as a cucumber, she says, Ethan, that's really interesting. Why are you interested in conflict? And he types, I have ideas for peace. So she says, really? That's very cool. Can you give us an example? And he types, let people make their own decisions. Don't make them fight if they want peace. And in that moment, I thought, she didn't type that. Type that. I mean, I witnessed it, you know, but like, it was like, wow, that was from him.
And this is coming from a 9-year-old.
Yeah, a 9-year-old. A 9-year-old. I was like, that's pretty darn accurate description of diplomacy.
Right.
That's pretty good. So that was one of the many things that Ethan continued to type. And with all that, with all the amazing things that he was typing, demonstrating just this intellect that was just magnificent to watch, he still had autism. He still had the behaviors. He was still dysregulated. It was still an issue.
So was he saying any words? Was he verbal at all, or only?
Yes, he has some language. He can, you know, mostly food, chocolate cake, you know, or iPad, the things he wants.
Right.
So to meet his needs. He doesn't use language for emotion. He doesn't use it for pain if he feels physical pain. And that's been an issue when we've known something was wrong.
Yeah, you need to let me know when you're in pain, dude.
I know. And he doesn't.
It's so confusing.
Yeah, he doesn't. So yeah, so limited language. Thank God he can physically speak, but it's very so yeah, he still had autism, and he was still dysregulated, and it reached a point where we were going to the emergency room every week because, again, he was growing. He was a big guy, and we were getting hurt, and he was getting hurt. And we would say to him after he would calm down, after a meltdown,
Yeah.
Ethan, why are you hurting us?
Right.
And he would type with the teacher, I can't help it.
Can't help it.
I can't. And you know, so this
So
was,
he doesn't even know why. I mean, because Robbie used to do that. I mean, puberty is the worst. As soon as they hit puberty age, forget it. Their hormones are going nuts on top of everything else going on in their bodies, right? Even my typical son, when he was like 12, he came to me and he said one day, he says, Mom, I'm just always so angry all the time. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I'm like, dude, it's hormones. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. It'll go away eventually, but you know.
oh, how beautiful that you could tell him that.
But well, that was not Robbie. That was my typical son, right? And so, but that gave me insight into Robbie. I was like, okay, yeah, that tells me what's going on in him. He just feels angry, and you know, it's like the hormones are raging and everything. But Robbie used to go after my husband more than anybody. You know, my husband's Italian and he's loud and he shouts when he talks, and he would set Robbie off, and he'd go in and he'd grab him by the shirt, and he would pull, and he wouldn't stop until he heard it rip, you know, or he'd pull him to the floor, whatever. And then he'd back away, and then he'd cry.
He'd cry. I was going to say.
And he cried like he was the one that had just been attacked. That was what was so confusing about the whole thing. And I was like, this poor kid, like what's going, I have no idea what's going on in there. And I have yet to, you know, and so now your son is even saying he can't help it.
And he would cry after.
Yeah. I mean, is there something going on in his head at the time that he's got angry at, or is it just something just comes upon him that he just goes into a rage?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think he's dysregulated. The brain, you know, the body chemistry is upset. Yeah, I think that they are dysregulated. You know, the brain and the body are not fully hooked up. Even medically, like we tried a bunch of medications in our desperation to help him stay calm. And medications, the prescribed medications, had the opposite effect than they were the ones that they were prescribed for. So like head banging, supposed to minimize head banging, it tripled the head banging. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, get him off this.
Yeah.
So our kids' biochemistry is different.
Yeah.
So I think what happens is that, you know, it's the primitive part of the brain. Something triggers the amygdala and they go into fight or flight.
Yes.
It becomes an emergency and they have to survive. Their brain is like, you're in danger, and they attack, even though they know they're not. Or it feels like they are. And so that's, and then they're upset because they love us and they don't want to be doing it and they couldn't control it. And it's a tough situation. And in our case, it had reached a point where he wasn't safe, we weren't safe. And we made the most difficult decision I've ever had to make, which was for him to go to a residential placement for kids with severe autism, so that he would get that 24/7 support.
That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening and it helped you gain a new perspective. To see the video version of the show, go to our YouTube channel, Robbie and Me, Autism Reality. If you're interested in buying our book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures, the link will be in our episode description, as well as my Instagram and Facebook pages. If you enjoyed the show and you'd like more content, please be sure to hit that like button, follow us, and don't forget to leave us a great review. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of today's episode. Be sure to join us again next time to hear the second half of the interview on Spectrum Perspectives.